Moe Berg remains one of the most enigmatic figures in the history of American intelligence. His life defies simple categorization. He was a professional baseball player who disliked baseball, a brilliant academic who never held a conventional career, and a spy whose most dangerous missions were conducted not on battlefields, but in classrooms and lecture halls. While many intelligence officers followed linear paths, Berg's life seemed fragmented, mysterious and contradictory. Yet it was precisely this combination of talents that made him one of the most valuable operatives in the Office of Strategic Services during World War II. Born on March 2, 1902 in New York City, Berg was the son of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. His father, Bernard Berg, was a pharmacist and a man who deeply valued education, pushing Moe toward academic excellence from an early age. Moe demonstrated remarkable intelligence as a child, quickly absorbing languages, reading voraciously, and developing an insatiable curiosity about the world. His upbringing was strict and disciplined, shaping both his intellect and his emotional reserve. Despite his scholarly inclinations, Berg also developed an interest in sports, particularly baseball. At Barringer High School in Newark, New Jersey, he excelled academically while also playing baseball at a competitive level. Even as a teenager, he displayed a pattern that would define his life. He performed well in sports to advance socially and professionally, but his true passion lay elsewhere. He approached the game analytically, studying mechanics and strategies, yet he never embraced the culture or fame associated with athletics. After high school, Berg enrolled at Princeton University. There, he majored in modern languages and quickly became fluent in several, including French, German, Spanish, Italian, and later Japanese and Russian. Professors noted his brilliance, yet he was considered eccentric. While classmates focused on social networking and career planning, Berg immersed himself in books, lectures, and languages, often isolating himself for long periods to master his studies. At Princeton, Berg also played baseball as a catcher. He was a competent player, but lacked the natural athleticism of elite athletes. Instead, he relied on intellect, studying opposing batters, memorizing plays, and analyzing strategies. This analytical approach foreshadowed the skills he would later use as a spy: observation, memory, and mental calculation. After graduating in 1923, Berg attended Columbia Law School, earning a degree in 1929. However, the structured world of law did not suit him. He preferred independent thinking and disliked rigid professional environments. Baseball, surprisingly, offered an alternative, a career path that allowed him independence while occupying him in a socially acceptable way. He was socially aloof, preferring reading and analysis to conversation and camaraderie. While in baseball, Berg demonstrated his unique capacity for observation and intelligence gathering. During a 1934 tour of Japan, officially a goodwill trip, he secretly filmed the city from rooftops and collected information about military facilities. This initiative, taken without orders, revealed an instinct for intelligence that would later make him invaluable to the OSS. Over more than a decade, he remained a backup catcher, valued more for his intelligence than for batting or fielding skills. Berg entered Major League Baseball in the 1920s, playing for teams including the Brooklyn Robins, Chicago White Sox, Cleveland Indians, and Washington Senators. By the late 1930s, Berg's baseball career was winding down, and his multilingual abilities and global exposure attracted attention from intelligence officials. In 1941, after the U.S. entered World War II, he was recruited into the Office of Strategic Services. Unlike many agents trained in weapons and sabotage, Berg's role was intellectual. He analyzed scientific data, interviewed academics, and evaluated reports, often operating in occupied or neutral European countries. His greatest strengths were discretion, intellect, and cultural fluency. Berg's most famous assignment involved monitoring Nazi Germany's nuclear program. Allied leaders feared that German physicists might develop an atomic bomb first. Berg was sent to Europe under deep cover, posing as a cultural attaché or academic observer. He attended lectures and conferences, observing top scientists, especially Werner Heisenberg. He analyzed both what was said and what was omitted, evaluating whether Germany posed an immediate nuclear threat. In 1944, Berg attended a lecture in Zurich, Switzerland, by Heisenberg. His instructions were explicit. If evidence suggested Germany was close to building an atomic bomb, Berg was authorized to assassinate Heisenberg. He carried a concealed weapon, aware that failure could have global consequences. After careful observation, he concluded that Germany's nuclear program was not yet threatening, and left without action. This choice may have changed the course of history, illustrating the moral and intellectual weight of his work. After the war, Berg returned to the US, largely unknown. Unlike many OSS operatives, he did not join the CIA, academia, or government positions. He moved frequently, lived modestly, and avoided publicity. Despite his intelligence and accomplishments, he struggled with civilian life, drifting between temporary jobs and staying with friends or relatives. Psychologically, Berg was intensely private and emotionally reserved. He rarely displayed fear, excitement, or pride, even during high-stakes missions. This emotional neutrality allowed him to operate effectively in tense situations, but it also isolated him from colleagues and friends. He formed few long-term relationships and remained solitary. Berg's intelligence work was not always dramatic in the traditional sense. He gathered information quietly, analyzed, and reported. His most critical decisions were intellectual and moral, knowing when to act and when. Restraint was necessary. His work was an early model of scientific intelligence, blending observation, analysis, and judgment rather than force. Even after the war, Berg remained a student of the world. He followed global politics, scientific developments, and intelligence work. Though he remained disconnected from official channels, he lived modestly and privately, rarely seeking recognition. When historians attempted interviews, he offered little, maintaining the secrecy that had defined his career. Moe Berg died in 1972 at age 70, largely forgotten by the public. Today, historians recognize him as a prototype of modern intelligence work, a field operative whose greatest weapons were observation, analysis, and moral judgment. His life challenges conventional narratives of heroism, showing that influence and courage can be exercised quietly, without fame or recognition. After returning from Europe at the end of World War II, Moe Berg entered a period of life that was quieter but no less complex. Unlike other OSS operatives who transitioned into the CIA, State Department, or academia, Berg drifted through a series of temporary jobs and consulting roles, often relying on friends or distant relatives for support. He never married and never sought fame or financial gain. Instead, he continued his lifelong habit of observation, study, and travel, seemingly drawn to the world as a subject of intellectual scrutiny rather than personal engagement. Psychologically, Berg's post-war life reflected the burdens of a career spent in secrecy. He had made decisions, with global consequences, including the choice not to assassinate Werner Heisenberg, yet no one outside a small circle would ever know. This anonymity weighed heavily, unlike soldiers or public figures, whose contributions are recognized through medals or acclaim. Berg's achievements were invisible, recorded only in confidential files. Yet this invisibility was also a protective shield, allowing him to live without the public scrutiny that might have compromised the lives of others or his own safety. Berg continued to follow developments in global politics, particularly in Europe, the Soviet Union, and the Middle East. He maintained an extensive library in multiple languages and kept meticulous notes on political, scientific, and cultural developments. Friends reported that he often traveled across the United States and occasionally to Europe, sometimes staying months at a time in cities like New York, Washington, or Boston, reading, observing, and corresponding with former colleagues. Even in retirement, he maintained the habits that had made him a successful intelligence officer: careful observation, analytical thinking, and discretion. One of the most fascinating aspects of Berg's post-war life was his enduring relationship with the intelligence community. Though no longer formally employed, he occasionally provided informal consultations, to agencies on technical or linguistic matters. He advised on the behavior and reliability of European scientists, reviewed reports in foreign languages, and offered insights into cultural nuances. His expertise, built over decades, remained highly valued, yet he continued to refuse public recognition or formal appointments. Berg's personal life remained minimal. He did not establish a home or a family, and he maintained a transient lifestyle. He reportedly lived out of suitcases for much of his later life, moving between the homes of friends, relatives, and temporary residences. His attachment to objects was primarily intellectual: books, papers, notes, and recordings. Friends described him as intensely private, occasionally charming in conversation, but often distant and reflective. This solitude, however, did not indicate isolation in thought. He remained deeply engaged with the world, following political events, scientific discoveries, and developments in global intelligence. Despite his reclusive tendencies, Berg occasionally interacted with historians, journalists, and biographers who sought to document the work of OSS operatives. He often provided detailed factual accounts, yet he remained cryptic about personal motivations, decision-making processes, and sensitive mission details. In interviews, he emphasized the collaborative nature of intelligence work rather than individual heroism, suggesting that even the most critical missions relied on networks, information, and timing rather than personal glory. This humility contrasted sharply with the dramatized accounts of spies that would later populate books and films. Berg's legacy as a spy was largely invisible during his lifetime. Newspapers and the public knew him primarily as a former baseball player, a man whose athletic career was far less remarkable than his intellectual exploits. Only after the declassification of OSS files did his wartime activities become widely known. Modern historians recognize him as an early model of the analyst operative, a person who combined field observation, cultural knowledge, language fluency, and critical thinking into a uniquely effective intelligence role. Unlike conventional agents, Berg rarely engaged in combat or overt operations. Instead, he gathered and interpreted information, often in subtle and morally complex situations. His most famous wartime mission, attending Werner Heisenberg's lecture in Zurich, remains a touchstone for understanding his unique approach. Tasked with evaluating the German nuclear program and potentially executing a targeted assassination, Berg relied on judgment, expertise, and moral reasoning. His choice not to act reflected the careful weighing of risk, ethics, and strategic consequence. This decision highlights a central theme of Berg's career. Intelligence is not merely about action, but about understanding, timing, and ethical restraint. Berg's story also illustrates the psychological demands of intelligence work. Living under constant secrecy, carrying knowledge that could have global consequences, and maintaining moral clarity in ethically ambiguous situations placed a unique strain on him. His solitude, emotional reserve, and rigorous intellectual habits were both coping mechanisms and professional tools. In this way, his life serves as a case study in the personal costs of espionage, a field where success often requires invisibility, patience, and moral discipline. Even in the years leading up to his death in 1972, Berg remained intellectually active. He continued to study languages, follow scientific developments, and analyze political events, often in multiple languages simultaneously. His notebooks, letters, and personal records indicate a mind that never ceased working, observing and connecting dots that others missed. Though largely forgotten by the public, within intelligence circles, his insights were quietly respected and consulted. Berg's death at age 70 marked the end of a life lived largely in the shadows. Public obituaries emphasized his baseball career, barely hinting at his role in some of the most sensitive missions of World War II. Yet for historians and intelligence professionals, his contributions have become emblematic of the most challenging and nuanced aspects of espionage: observation over action, judgment over impulse, intellect over force. Analyzing Berg's career provides lessons for both historical and modern intelligence. He demonstrates that effective espionage often relies on subtlety, cultural fluency, linguistic skill, and moral judgment rather than brute strength or flashy operations. His work also underscores the value of independent thinking within hierarchical structures. He operated with minimal supervision, yet achieved results that had global impact. Finally, his life highlights the tension between public recognition and operational necessity. Many of his most important actions were invisible precisely because visibility would have endangered lives and missions. For content creators, Berg offers a compelling narrative, a man who traversed worlds, sports, academia and espionage without fully belonging to any. His intelligence work connects to major historical events, including monitoring the German nuclear program, collaborating with the OSS, and influencing post-war scientific and military intelligence. His personality, private, analytical, ethically aware, adds depth to the story, making it ideal for video, documentary, or long-form narrative formats. Berg's life also invites reflection on the ethical dimensions of espionage. His assignments required balancing strategic objectives with moral considerations, often in life-or-death situations. His choices illustrate that intelligence work is not simply tactical but deeply human, involving conscience, judgment, and the weighing of consequences in situations where clear right or wrong answers may not exist. In conclusion, Moe Berg remains a figure of unique fascination. He was a man who combined intellectual brilliance, linguistic mastery, moral reasoning, and field experience into a career that defied conventional categories. His life illustrates the hidden layers of intelligence work, where observation, analysis, and restraint can be as powerful as weapons. Though largely unrecognized during his lifetime, his legacy endures as a model of the quiet, analytical, and morally conscious operative, the spy whose greatest strength was his mind. Moe Berg's story continues to captivate historians, intelligence professionals, and general audiences alike. It challenges perceptions of heroism, illustrating that impact can occur without fame, and that lives of discretion can shape history as profoundly as any battlefield engagement. His work laid the foundation for modern intelligence practices and demonstrated the enduring importance of observation, judgment, and ethical reflection in national security. From his early years in New York City to the lecture halls of Europe, and finally to his quiet later life in the United States, Berg's trajectory reflects a unique blend of intellect, discretion, and moral responsibility. His life reminds us that some of history's most consequential actions occur not in public view, but in silence, careful study, and the quiet exercise of judgment.